everyone. Welcome you guys to the Colorado Wolf and Wildlife Center. My name's Elizabeth. I'll be taking you through the tour today. Kirk is also going to be tagging along, making sure us and all of the animals stay safe. So first of all, I just want to say thank you for being here and choosing to spend this time of the day with us. So first of all, I do want to note that we are an AZA facility, so that stands for the Association of Zoos and Aquariums. That holds us to a very, very high standard of animal care and puts us on par with major zoos and aquariums across the country. There's actually only 15 sanctuaries in the U.S. with that certification, and we are the only one in Colorado, so it's something we're incredibly proud of and like to brag a bit about. It also means that we are first and foremost an educational facility. So on that note, I want to start out providing a bit of context about wolves and the challenges that they face today. So this map here, if everyone can see, shows the historic range of wolves in the United States prior to European settlement. At that point, there were nearly 500,000 wolves, an estimated population of 450,000. So in blue here, we have the gray or the timber wolf range. So those names are actually interchangeable and refer to the same species in the same way you could call a mountain lion a cougar, a puma, or a panther. In green, we have the Mexican gray wolf, so that's a subspecies of the gray wolf. And then over here in red, we have the red wolf. Now I am curious, has anyone here heard of the red wolf before? Yeah, that's pretty common, no one has, yeah. Which is actually quite a shame because they're endemic to the United States, so that means they're found here and nowhere else. But I'll talk to you in a moment why so few people are aware of them. So our story is actually going to begin over in Europe in the late Middle Ages, so right around the middle of the 14th century. At that point, there was a pandemic going around that is estimated to have killed up to 2/3 of Europe's population. Does anyone know what I'm referring to? Yeah, the Black Death bubonic plague. So because of that incredibly high mortality rate, they were actually unable to keep up with proper burial of their dead. What they were doing instead was creating mass graves on the outskirts of town. Now, a lot of wild predators were attracted to those mass graves because it's a free food source. Wolves were among those predators, and while I get that it would be disconcerting to see a wolf walking around with a human body part, they were especially harshly judged for this. Now, that's because Europeans were being raised on stories that we're still telling today. So the Little Red Riding Hood, the Three Little Pigs, the Boy Who Cried Wolf, the list goes on and on. Who's the bad guy in all of those? The big bad wolf. Yes, you guys knew that answer. So because of that folklore, coupled with the plague, the Europeans had developed a very deep-seated fear of wolves. They arrived to the United States, encountered that population, again nearly 500,000, and began an extensive extermination program. The government was actually providing financial incentives to anyone who would be willing to kill a wolf. So because of that incentivized killing, we went from nearly 500,000 wolves to, by the mid-1900s, just between 300 and 500 individuals across the country. So very, very successful, obviously. Now, before we take a glance at ranges of those wolves today, I'm curious if anyone here is from outside the state of Colorado. Many of you. Okay, so very quickly we're going to go around, and I'd love to hear where you're from and if you think you have wild wolves in your state today. Let's start over here. Okay, yeah, no worries if it's a guess. Okay.
Alabama.
Okay.
Arkansas, no.
Florida, yes.
Okay. Okay. Okay.
Texas, yes.
Florida, yeah.
Okay. Awesome. So keeping that in mind, yeah, no worries if those were guesses. If you guys don't have a clue, that's why we're doing this. So keeping that in mind, take one last glance at this very, very colorful map we have here. Here are our ranges today. So a lot less color, right? So again, in blue, we have that gray wolf population, most densely populated in the upper Great Lakes region, the northern Rockies, as well as parts of the Pacific Northwest. We have a wild population of about 186 Mexican gray wolves split between Arizona and New Mexico. And that very, very small red dot on the coast of North Carolina is what is left of the red wolf range. There are only 10 of those guys left in the United States, which, since they're only found here, means there are 10 left in the world today. This paints a very, very clear picture, right? So we absolutely decimated those populations. What did we do about it? It was President Richard Nixon who in 1973 signed into law the Endangered Species Act. The following year, gray wolves were added to that list and received protection in 1974. Now that brings me to one of the most important points that I really hope you'll leave today with, and that is how crucial wolves are to their ecosystems. So because we had so few wolves at this point, first of all, populations were unable to bounce back on their own, right? Damage had already been done. Also, biologists began to notice that the habitats where wolves had previously been found had started to suffer as a result of that absence. So to talk about this, I want to talk about Yellowstone National Park, where they actually did a reintroduction of those gray wolves. So the last known wolf pack in Yellowstone was killed in 1926. So for nearly 70 years, that park went without their apex predator. Wolves are the apex predator, meaning that they're at the very top of their food chain. They're also what is called a keystone species. So if you think of a keystone archway or bridge, that keystone is in the middle holding everything else together. You pull out the keystone, everything else collapses. That's exactly what happens to the natural habitat of wolves when they are removed. In ecology, we refer to this as a trophic cascade. So over in Yellowstone, that's exactly what they were seeing. They didn't have those wolves, so their prey animals, mainly deer and elk, began to overpopulate and overgraze. They did this to such an extent that they were destroying that natural vegetation, and the area began to look quite desert-like. By 1995, that region was considered a crashing ecosystem by biologists. So that brings us to the reintroduction. 31 gray wolves were captured in Western Canada and reintroduced to Yellowstone National Park. They got to work doing what wolves do best, chasing around deer and elk. They reduced the sizes of those megaherds, but they also fundamentally changed the behavior of those animals. Now that wolves were back, the deer began to avoid valleys and gorges, areas where they would be more easily caught. Because they were no longer trampling along on that turf, those began to reforest. Since you had forests coming back, you saw the return of songbirds and migratory birds. Also, the presence of forests restabilized the riverbanks. So beavers came back. And beavers are ecological engineers, so they got to work building the habitat to support a lot of other species. Wolves had also reduced coyote populations, so then the rabbits and mice, those populations went up. Since you had a bunch of those guys, we saw the return of hawks, foxes, even bald eagles and bears came back. So within 20 years of that reintroduction, they saw a return of over 350 plant and animal species. So absolutely incredible. Wolves are so crucial to their ecosystems. None of you were from Colorado, it seems, but Colorado actually recently passed Proposition 114, which is our plan to reintroduce the gray wolf to the western slope of the Rockies by 2023. Here at the center, we're very, very excited to have wolves coming back to Colorado, and we're also hopeful that the effect will be similar to what they saw over in Yellowstone. Moving on to those Mexican gray wolves, again, wild population around 186 today. They were actually considered extinct in the United States by the 1980s. At that point, we went down to Mexico to see if we could capture some down there to reintroduce and bump up those populations. Had a look around down there. There were only 5 left. Fortunately, one among those was a capable breeding female, but that poor girl had a very, very big job ahead of her. Her and just 6 other males, so 2 from captivity, repopulated that entire species. So every single Mexican gray wolf that we have today is descendant from those original 7. They did an amazing job for their species, but anyone familiar with genetics in the most simple sense would know that that creates a massive issue as far as genetic diversity is concerned. We do actually have the privilege of housing 2 of these critically endangered wolves here at the center. So when we meet them on the tour trail, I'll talk about some efforts being made to bump up that genetic diversity in those wild populations today. Now that poor red wolf over on the coast of North Carolina, the red wolf is a distinct species of wolf, so separate from the gray wolf and all of those other subspecies. And the thing about them is that they do slightly resemble a coyote. And the thing about coyotes is that here in the U.S., we love to hunt and kill them. So oftentimes, when there have been efforts to reintroduce those guys to the wild, they're shot and killed by someone thinking that they're killing a coyote. Or someone knows exactly what they're doing, they just want to kill a wolf, and afterwards they get to claim, oh, but I thought it was a coyote. right? So it's very, very challenging to prove intent in court. Everyone's really gotten off with nothing but a slap on the wrist for this. Of those 10 that we have in the wild today, we've identified no breeding pairs. What they're actually doing is breeding with coyotes. But when you take a wolf and a coyote, you get a coy wolf. So first of all, you lose that federal protection, so then they can be legally hunted. And second of all, it's diluting that red wolf gene, which we really don't have a lot of. It's quite likely that we will lose this wild population in our lifetimes. So very sad situation there. Now, those letter grades assigned to each state, you may have noticed, as you now know, that does not refer to wolf population, but rather trapping laws in that state. So the organization putting those together is Born Free USA. That essentially reflects how outdated or strict the trapping laws are in that state. Now when I'm talking about traps, this is what I mean. So this here is a steel leg hold trap. This is a relatively small one. It would be used to catch animals the size of a beaver or raccoon perhaps. It'll still exert 90 pounds of pressure when it goes off, which also means it takes 90 pounds of pressure to open it back up. These are banned in at least 100 countries worldwide, and they're used in about 42 states across the U.S. Now, the thing about these traps is that they're not very good at catching what they've been set out for. They're only catching that target prey animal about 24% of the time. I also want to note that if your state has a lower grade, so a D or an F perhaps, what that means is someone can buy a trap like this with no education on it and place it as close to 6 feet to a hiking or walking trail, a public hiking or walking trail. So now, 76% of the time, this is catching unintended prey. What do you think is ending up in these more often than not?
Dogs.
I heard it, yeah. So it's going to be mostly your pet dogs and your children. It can also be the federally protected bald eagle. And the thing about our trapping laws in this country is that once you are in the trap, you belong to the trapper. These are oftentimes monitored by game cameras, and it is illegal to tamper with, release an animal from, or remove these from the location where they were placed. Again, banned in at least 100 countries worldwide. We're still using them here. If that's as upsetting to you as it is to me, I would very much encourage you to go to bornforusa.org, again, the organization that put those grades together. First of all, they have some really wonderful petitions you can sign to help us ban these more widely. You also can find a lot more information on why your state has the particular grade that they do. So, back in the day, when we first started using those, we needed to get fur to stay warm, right? Fair enough. Nowadays, we're using some other means to get our fur. That is fur farms. So bear with me, this is the hardest part of the tour to listen to. There are an estimated 300 fur farms in the U.S. today. And the common practice in those places is to shove 3 to 5 baby foxes into a 1 by 3 foot wire cage. They'll spend their whole lives there, but that is a very short life, because at the age of 7 months, those baby foxes will go through their first molt. That fur is harvested immediately because due to the incredible stress of the situation they're living in, those baby foxes have been known to self-mutilate or even cannibalize others. When the time does come, there are a variety of means to kill that baby fox. I will spare the details. We do have some little ears with us. But I want you to be aware that they are not always confirming that that fox is deceased prior to moving forward with that process, so to speak. I know it's hard to hear. It is very hard for me to talk about, but it's important that we're all aware of what's happening at over 300 locations in our country today. And there's a simple solution, right? The power is in the hands of the consumer here, because we can very easily not be buying fur products, not shop at companies that are still selling fur, or not shop at stores that are still selling fur products. If we're not demanding that, they're not going to be using these inhumane ways to produce that. Another very powerful tool that we all have is to call Congress. This number here is actually the number for a live operated switchboard. And then you can speak to your representative about those fur farms, about trapping laws in your state perhaps, or even those 10 red wolves who are really likely to go extinct in our lifetimes, and so few of us were familiar with them. So really powerful tool. I get that that can be intimidating. If it is, we've even put out a little script for you guys, so feel free to take a picture of this or that script. We've even made Congress calling cards, so you can pick up one of these on your way out. It has, again, that number and then just a couple bullet points to help you through that conversation. But an amazing tool to tell our representatives that these are issues that we care a lot about and want to make some dramatic changes here. All right, that concludes the very difficult at times introduction. It will be more uplifting from here, and I actually will invite us to turn around and meet our first animals on the tour here. Red, Scarlet! Red! Oh, yep, okay. If you guys can see on the second floor of that condo, this enclosure houses our two 4-year-old red foxes, Rhett and Scarlet. So red foxes are actually the most widespread land meat eater in the world. They'll be found at just about any elevation as long as there are rodents for them to eat. You'll notice we also have a back half to that enclosure. Back there, if you got a chance to see her on your way in, is Zoe. She's a little black fluff ball, oftentimes sitting on one of those wooden pedestals. She is a 5-year-old red fox. We like to say that Coda must have skipped that chapter in her biology textbook. She was just 8 months old. That playdate went extra well. Fast forward 63 days, and she doesn't come down for dinner. We go up to see what's going on. Notice a bit of belly bloating. We feared the worst, which is gastric torsion, which is very dangerous in wolves and domestic dogs. So we had the vet come look at her. He said she's perfectly healthy, but she's pregnant. Now, since she was so young, all of her nutrients were going to her rather than the growth of her pups. So only 2 of those pups did survive, and they were born with something called metabolic bone disease. Now, also because of her incredibly young age, she wants more kibble. Beautiful. She actually took no interest in those pups. So from the age of just 2 days old, they were hand raised by our founder. And one of those pups is Miss Tala, who we just met, our tiny but mighty. Now Amarak, lounging back there, also has a very unique story here because he is our only international rescue. So we got him from Colombia in South America. As you may know, though, wolves are not native to South America. It's most likely that he ended up there as part of the illegal wildlife trade to be someone's pet. It didn't work out because he was found wandering the streets by himself and was then rescued by a zoo down there. But after about a year of having him, they wanted to find a more suitable habitat for a wolf, and that's how we ended up with him here. But going back to that illegal wildlife trade, that's an industry estimated as valued at $23 billion every single year. She's being such a cutie. So that actually makes it the 4th most lucrative global crime. Now, in that trade, wildlife and animal parts are traded much like illegal drugs and arms. Some common examples you may be familiar with are elephant ivory, rhino horn, shark fin, pangolin scales. The list goes on and on, though. Oftentimes, vulnerable wild populations are being pushed over the brink of extinction. It's actually the 2nd leading cause of the loss of biodiversity on this planet today. In the past 50 years, it's estimated that we have lost 70% of wildlife. Yes, 70% in 50 years. The 2 leading causes of this are habitat destruction and the illegal wildlife trade. And much like with those fur farms, the power is in the hands of the consumer. It is our responsibility to be informed about what we are buying, where it came from, what it came from, to make sure that we're not unknowingly buying into this industry that is causing so much destruction on this planet. What you see her having right now, actually also, we do give them different furs and hides as mental stimulation. It's also great for their mouth health. So especially on their fasting days, we'll give them those. They love to play with it. She's showing off right now. Any questions about these 2? Oh, look at you, Coda. Very good. You caught that yourself? She's like, yeah, I got it. Oh, good job, girl. All right. Gonna have to pull you away from her. We'll head on up the hill. She's being so cute. So we're actually gonna head to the left of here. Meet a very, very special surprise. 2 special surprises. Poco. And back there we also have Pono. They're New Guinea singing dogs. These guys are puppies. They're just 6 months old, but they will remain quite small. They'll actually weigh just about 20 to 30 pounds, even when they're full grown. Oh, some kisses. So the New Guinea singing dog is closely related to the Australian dingo, and they actually have a fossil record dating back at least 6,000 years. They're called living fossils for that reason. Now, throughout that long history, there's been a lot of debate of how to classify these guys. We don't know really if they're wild dogs, feral dogs, or domestic dogs. Right now, we think they're either the wildest domesticated dog or the most domesticated wild dog. Bit of a tongue twister, but very interesting. Now, these guys are native to the island of Papua New Guinea, and they're well adapted to hunt in steep and highly vegetated areas. So you'll notice extra loud, extra long, extra high pitch. I like to say that if you don't feel silly, you're doing something wrong. And we'll see if we can get a response, but it is nap time, so we'll just try our luck. I will ask as well, after we have done that initial howl, that we all just remain silent. That way, if they do respond to us, everyone can get a video of that sound without having the sound of people trying to sound like wolves.
We all want to face that way towards Cal.
Yeah, we want our little gossip girl to start it off. All right, on the count of 3. 1, 2, 3. All right, we can try it once more, but that might have been what we're gonna get. But all right, let's join in with Coda, see if we can get the others going. On the count of 3. 1, 2, 3.
Well, it is starting to get later in the day. Well, that's only 1:37.